Tactics are widely considered to be a very important part of the game. They serve as useful multiple move tricks to win material or get another type of advantage. In this video, we'll be going over some of the most common types of tactics as well as some uncommon ones that are good to know anyway.
A fork is a tactic where one piece threatens to take multiple pieces at once. Although any piece can pull off a fork, the most common pieces to do it are the knight and the pawn. The knight is especially good at forking because of its unique movement. The pawn is good at forking because it can threaten to take defended pieces. One example is in this diagram, where the knight on e5 is attacking or forking the king on f7 and the queen on g6.
A pin is a tactic where one piece stops an enemy piece from moving, as long as there is a more important enemy piece hiding behind it. Essentially, the pin piece is shielding the other piece from an attack. This tactic is strongest when the piece being shielded is the king, because then it is illegal to move the pin piece. For example, in this diagram the knight on f6 is pinned to the queen on d8 by the bishop on g5, so if the knight moves, the queen will be taken. The rook on f7 is pinned to the king on g8 by the bishop on a2, so the rook cannot move at all.
A skewer is basically the exact opposite of a pin. If you attack a high-ranked piece and force it to move so you can take the lower-ranked piece behind it, you use the skewer. This is a very common and useful tactic. One important example is in this diagram where the bishop on g5 is attacking the queen on f6. After it moves, white will take the rook on d8. White just skewered the queen and rook.
A double attack is very similar to a fork. Most of the time when someone says double attack, fork will work just as well. However, the main differences are that a fork can attack more than two things at once, and that a double attack usually attacks two undefended pieces specifically. A helpful example is in this diagram, where the queen on d3 is attacking both the rook on a6 and the knight on e4. Black can't defend both of them.
A discovered attack occurs when a piece moves out of the way of another piece, and when the first piece is out of the way, the second piece is attacking something. Discovered attacks are extra powerful if the second piece is attacking the king, because then the first piece can do whatever they want. One example of a discovered attack is in this diagram, where if the knight on e3 moves to f5 or g4, the knight will be attacking the queen, and it will discover an attack from the rook on e1, checking the king on e8. Black cannot defend against both of these.
Overprotecting is a very rare tactic that is unlikely to show up in your games. If you defend a piece more times than it's necessary to keep it safe for whatever reason, you are overprotecting the piece. Unlike the previous tactics, it's unlikely to win you the game, but it might stop you from losing it. For example, in this diagram, Black is attacking the pawn on d4 with the knight and with the queen. White is defending it with the knight and with the queen. If Black was to take the pawn, White would be able to safely take back, which means that the pawn is defended well enough. However, Black has let's say Black has a plan, and that plan is to play a5 followed by a4, attacking the knight. After forcing the knight to move away, it would be safe for Black to take on d4. So if White played a move like rook to d1, he would be overprotecting the pawn so that when it becomes time to do so, his knight can move without losing the pawn.
Interposing is when you put one of your pieces in the way of an enemy piece. Sometimes you're blocking it from checking you, sometimes you are blocking it from defending something, and sometimes you're blocking it from attacking something. One interesting example of how interposing might be useful is this diagram, where black is checking your king on g1 with their queen on b1. You can block the check, or interpose, by moving either the rook or the bishop to e1.
Overloading is another rare tactic where you can make it so that an enemy piece is doing too many things at one time. Maybe it's the only piece defending 2 or 3 other pieces. Or maybe it's trying to defend the king from being checkmated but has other things to do as well. In this example, the queen on d8 is defending both the knight on d3 and the rook on c7. However, once white takes the rook on c7 with his bishop on g3, in order to take the bishop, black's queen has to give up defense of the knight. Black's queen in this situation is overloaded because it can't actually defend both of the pieces.
A decoy is when you distract an enemy piece from doing an important job. You can do this by attacking it or otherwise forcing it to move somewhere else. For example, in this diagram, if black's knight wasn't on f6, white could play queen takes h7 with checkmate. If he plays knight d5, he'll be using a decoy to draw the knight away from defending that pawn so he can checkmate.
A remove the defender tactic is very similar to a decoy tactic or an overloading tactic, except instead of forcing the enemy piece to move, you just take it. A simple example is in this diagram, where white would like to take h7 with his queen to checkmate black, but the knight on f6 would take back, causing white to lose a queen. If white sees that and plays bishop takes f6, this removes the defender and black is in trouble.
A Zwischenzug, or as most players call it, an in-between move, is something unexpected or random looking that you do in between a bunch of captures or attacks. For example, in this diagram, there are a bunch of pieces under attack. And if black decided to take on a3, it may look like white's in a little bit of trouble. Because if he takes the bishop back, black will take the knight on f3. However, the Zwischenzug, or in-between move, knight to g5 check, gets the knight out of under attack and forces black to get out of check. And after king to g8, b takes a3, material remains even, so white did not lose a knight.
A clearance sacrifice is a rare tactic where you decide you really want one piece to be on a square, but you already have a piece on there. So you get rid of the second piece so that you can move the first one. This isn't often useful, but one interesting example is in this diagram. White wants to play queen h7 with checkmate, but the rook on h7 is in the way. Rook h8 here would be a clearance sacrifice, because white is getting rid of the rook since it was somewhere the queen wanted to go.
These tactics pop up in more games than you'd expect, so make sure to keep an eye out for them the next games you play. Of course, don't try to remember absolutely everything immediately, but regular review of these tactics will help you remember them so you have a better chance of finding one of them when they appear in your next game. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.